So then on to youth policing. And we can think about the specific policing context in Vancouver, which relates to, for example, the Yankee 10 car, which involves a probation officer riding along with a police officer, and they're responsible for monitoring youth who are on bail or who are on probation, making sure that they're abiding by their conditions like curfew checks, but also helping to liaise with, for example, nonprofit centers in the downtown east side. There's another key nonprofit center called Covenant House in the Yaletown area, and they can help work with these centers to make sure that youth are safe. So this can be both a positive and a negative thing, depending on how you might look at it. A positive thing would be that police can be used to help keep youth safe, but others might say that this will result in the over-policing of the most marginalized youth, and maybe that's a bad thing. I think we need actual research into this to see which one of these factors or perspectives is true. When it comes to the responsibilities of police, they have quite a few compared to when just arresting an adult, because when they arrest a youth, they also have to notify the parent. They have to notify where the youth is being detained, or they have to tell the parent where the youth is being detained, let the parent know the reason for the arrest. And when they are arresting the youth, they have to inform the youth of their charter rights, but not just, read it to the letter of the law. They have to make sure that their rights are explained to the youth in a manner that they understand, especially because, as we'll talk about, youth tend to have a poor understanding of what a right means, might be more likely to waive their rights or think that their rights are something that they're not entitled to. Police have a lot of discretion when it comes to minor offenses. They can basically do nothing, or they could just issue a minor warning and release the youth back onto the street, or could take the youth home to their parents, ask the parent to be responsible for the punishment. They might take the youth to the station, kind of write them up, or just release them. When it comes to more serious offenses, still they could refer the youth to a program as opposed to taking the more formal measure. They might arrest and hold the youth in sheriff's cells or have the youth moved to custody. When it comes to charges, in most provinces in Canada, police will be the party responsible for charging a person with an offense. In BC, we have a special Crown Counsel who's responsible for doing that. And so police simply recommend to Crown Counsel that charges be made in response to more serious offenses. When it comes to making these decisions or the factors that affect discretion, there are legal characteristics such as the degree of severity of the offense or the harm done, but also some extra legal characteristics, some which might make sense, like if it's a gang-related offense or a gang-affiliated youth, that might impact their decision. The youth's home and school situation might also impact decision-making if the youth is in foster care or the police believe that the youth's parents might not be suitable for responding to this issue. But also we can see some concerning types of individual characteristics affecting police decision-making, including mental health and race or ethnicity. Talked about extrajudicial measures, and what's really important to understand is currently under the YCJ, police have to consider the use of an extrajudicial measure. Not only that they have to consider it, but police should presume that the extrajudicial measure is the best way to respond to youth who have committed nonviolent offenses and don't have a prior history of offending. That's not to say that a youth involved in a violent offense or a youth with a history of offending can't receive an extrajudicial measure. Just that police have a responsibility to say that, hey, if they don't have a violent offense, I probably should presume that the extrajudicial measure is the best way to deal with this young person to keep them out of the formal court system. When police are interviewing youth, it's really important to make sure that the youth understands their rights, because when it comes to persons in authority, youth have an issue with understanding that their statements might not feel voluntary. They might think that they have to give those statements to police. They don't understand that they have a right to remain silent. What I really want students who want to be police officers to understand is how you frame questions to youth is really important because of how suggestible youth are. Leading questions or closed-answer questions, closed-ended questions can lead to, for example, false confessions. We saw this in the Brendan Dassey case where he's really operating at a low functioning level, and that made him more suggestible. So it was very easy for police to suggest something, and he doesn't understand. So he's just looking at the police for guidance. And if the police say one thing, he is just going to kind of go along with it because they're the persons in authority. They must know what's right, so he'll just agree with them. And where this can become a particularly interesting or large issue is with respect to Mr. Big operations. So Mr. Big operations are where a police agency will pose as, for example, an organized crime group. And undercover officers will pose as like leaders of a gang or an organized crime group, recruit the suspect to be part of the gang. And then while that individual is in association with these undercover officers, the undercover officers will ask them about any outstanding crimes they've committed that might lead to involvement in the justice system, and say things like, hey, we have connections to police, connections to the courts. We can make these problems go away. Just let us know what happened and we'll take care of it. In the United States, this procedure is actually considered illegal. And it's because there's a belief that it's especially susceptible to false confessions. And so we watched a documentary that talks about lawyer Marie Herren, who sort of pointed out that people are very vulnerable to false confessions. And youth are especially vulnerable to false confessions because they have cognitive and emotional immaturities. They're more prone to suggestibility and more compliant or submissive to authority.